Good morning, everyone.
I'm just gonna put it on the floor.
How's everyone's proof? How are we doing? Yeah? Great. Love to hear it. Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Noah Morse. I'll be your moderator today for the Putting Together an Indie Production panel. This festival and this panel is powered by Proof and the American Cinematheque, and this conversation is being presented by SAG-Indie. Happy to have you guys here. We're going to do some moderated questions that I have for our lovely panel, and then we're going to open it up to you guys. And then when we are done, if you could all join us in the lobby, we're going to have to turn it over to get ready for the next thing in here. But as we start, I'd like to welcome and introduce our panelists. If you guys want to go down and say your names and where you're from and what you do.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm Eugene Sun Park. I'm the executive director and founder of Full Spectrum Features. We're I guess you could call us a mini-ish film studio based in Chicago. We're formally structured as a 501c3 with a series of subsidiary for-profit companies. So we do film production, film finance, post-production, and a bunch of other stuff. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Natalie Metzger. I'm the VP of Production and Development at Vanishing Angle. And yeah, I'm from South Florida originally.
Hi, everyone. My name is Faraz El-Fuqaha. I'm the co-founder of Shamo Studio, AI tools for filmmakers when it comes to logistics and finance. Also, we're one of the vendors if you'd like to check us out after the panel. Also, I'm a producer as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eliza Haikova. I am Manager of Development and Sponsorship at SAGindie.
Thank you, guys. We have a lot to talk about today, and I think that a lot of people in this room are going to have a lot of questions for you guys. But considering we are at the Proof Film Festival, a lot of us are thinking about the transition from shorts to features. I assume most of the folks in this room know how to put a short together. If you guys are here, it means you've probably done it successfully. But as many of us are prepping to kind of get into our first features and take these shorts into that new area, sometimes it feels very overwhelming. Like, I don't know what to do or where to start. So I want to ask you guys, maybe if you could talk about the first few things that you feel like filmmakers should be thinking about when they're deciding to go ahead with a project and move forward and say, I want to do this feature.
So we've done a lot of kind of short to features at our production company, and we have found that shorts are just a great way to kind of test audiences and see like, hey, is this film really landing? A lot of the features that we ended up making from shorts were not initially intended to be features. It was just that the short did so well that it was kind of like one of those things like, okay, well, this is working. How can we adapt this this short into a feature? But features are not that different from shorts. They're completely different in the marketplace, but in terms of the actual making of them, it's just a longer short, And so I think you can do all the same things of prepping for a feature that you do for a short, And I would say get as many of the materials together as you can ahead of time, as you're submitting to grants or trying to get financing or talking to different financing companies or distributors. The more you can have in place, the better, because at this point, everyone has a feature script that they're trying to get made. And so what can help yours stand apart? So getting a really amazing lookbook together that you feel really proud of, that really shows your visual style, your design, your tone, all of those things. Obviously you have your short as a proof of concept, but the lookbook is something that is one of the first things that when I get sent a project, I scroll through. Before I watch the short, before I read the feature script, I look through the lookbook, because the lookbook is the thing that takes the least amount of time, right? If you're reading a feature script, you're committing 90 minutes. If you're watching a short, you're committing 10 to 15 minutes. If you're looking through a lookbook, it can take just a couple minutes to look through and be like, oh, is this something that I want to be investing time in? And so I would really highly recommend putting together a really strong lookbook. And as you put together that lookbook, it's also going to give you all of the helpful things that you can use for applying to different labs and applying to all those things of like getting your director statement really spot on, getting your synopsis perfect, getting your pitch, all of those things together.
The question again is how to go from a short to a feature, or what to think about when you're already with the short and.
It's a little bit of both,
Okay.
but it's really what are the first things that you think filmmakers should prioritize when they're deciding to move forward with a project?
Yeah. I think maybe in some ways this is a second thing. So a lot of times the first thing, or maybe the primary thing you're thinking about, is all the reasons why someone should say yes to your project, why they should invest in it, why they should attach to it. And absolutely that's why you're excited about the film and why you want to do it. I think it's just as important for filmmakers to think about all the reasons why someone might say no to your project. And that's another way to say that is, what are the doubts that a potential person's going to have when they're looking at your overall package? And instead of trying to hide or like pretend that they don't exist, I think it's really important to tease those out and really shine a light on them and look at them. So an example is, if you're a first-time feature director and you've built out this really passionate team with a DP or maybe an AD or a producer friend that you've produced all your features with, that's a great team to be making your first feature with. But from an outside perspective, people are going to say, these are all newbies. Like, no one here on this core team has made a feature, and that's going to be perceived as potentially as a weakness. So yeah, I would say in addition to, or maybe alongside thinking of all the things that are great about your project, why you think someone would say yes, think about exhaustively and without ego all the reasons why someone might say no.
I totally agree with both of your points on the creative side. I would recommend and suggest you put your producing side, or like the business side a bit. As you're jumping from a short film to a feature, maybe keep in mind the size that you're trying to do here. Like, are you making a short film and then making a $10 million feature? Probably not as a first feature. Maybe you're looking at a micro budget feature, or maybe slightly bigger. So I think keeping that in mind is going to help you also determine which story should I pursue in writing or like in making as a first feature, as you're trying to obviously find your path in this industry. On the other aspects as well, I think just the reality of our industry is everyone has, as you said, everyone has a feature script. Everyone is a director. Everyone's a writer, at least in this town. So like, why you? Like, why it's gonna be you and your project or your team? So the expectation that someone's gonna find you and give you the opportunity to make it. My advice is usually assume that's not gonna happen, and usually you're gonna make it on your own. So like, how can you make it on your own, and then hopefully you'll find your supporters on your way. And just to be a bit more practical, you'll probably need 2 or 3 things to make your feature. You need the idea or the script or the IP, you need your funding, and you need your cast. Get 2 elements of these, and you'll get the third one, and you'll make it. I mean, obviously, I'm simplifying, but that's kind of the elements to make like a feature film happens.
My advice is really going to be more couched in my employer, which is SAG-Indie, and really quick, like just a little bit about what we do. We're not actually employed by SAG-AFTRA. We are a separate educational outreach organization who is there to kind of hold your hand through the paperwork process if you've decided that hiring SAG talent is right for your project. So bearing that in mind, I'm going to say very specifically the things that you need to have before you start production is that you need to have your script and a line item budget, and you need to have a chain of title on whatever project you're making, and then the cast. But it's more straightforward, and you'll probably also actually need to have a bond, depending on which of the low budget contracts you've signed and whether it's a feature or a micro budget, which doesn't require a bond. If you have questions about that, I'm not going to dominate the conversation with figuring out how much money you will need to give SAG before you even start production, but you can find me after and I can give you some guidance there.
I'd like to kind of tack on to what all of you guys are saying here, and Eliza, you kind of answered it in a more concrete way, but I think everyone will have their own opinion, whether it's creative or more logistical. How do we think about something that is really like production ready, and like, you know, you guys as producers can look at the project and say, okay, I think we're really ready to move forward with this in a meaningful way. What are some factors you guys are considering?
Cast and budget. To me, it you know, and usually cast comes first. Starting to attach talent, I'm seeing, at least right now in the industry, it is harder and harder to get something greenlit without having some kind of talent attached. And so having your cast attached, at least, you know, the leads, and then having a budget that, you know, really clearly lays out the production plan, everyone feels good about it, and then obviously raising that budget. But having, you know, those things in place are so key. And, you know, the budget is something where, you know, I think that most films can be made at any budget level. It just depends on what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're willing to deprioritize or prioritize. And so, you know, really looking at your script and seeing, you know, you might have a script and you started taking it around to people and started trying to raise financing, and you were really struggling to hit the numbers that you need to hit. Take another look at your script. Is there a way to trim something or simplify things where you can make it for less, or make it for maybe the amount of money that you do have, or that you know that you can get, or that you can circle back to a financier and say, hey, instead of just having a portion of the pie, you can have the whole thing. Like, but you know, the budget is a lot smaller. Are you willing to come in on this with me? But you know, figuring out those kind of ways to get the budget to kind of fit with what you think you can raise and achieve.
Maybe this is a strange way to characterize one of the points that you made, but I think I always know that I'm approaching production ready with a project when I've had at least one really big like blowout fight with the director, usually about the script and what needs to come out of it. Like if you haven't gotten to that point where everyone feels like they're, what's the expression, giving a pound of flesh to this thing, like you haven't really scrutinized the script and really thought hard about how do we cut this down to the bone to really make sure that the essentials are there, but that we're not shooting stuff that's really unnecessary. I mean, it is true that it's a lot cheaper to cut things at the script stage than in editing, and especially as budgets get tighter and the marketplace gets tighter, it's even more important to have those hopefully healthy like blowout fights with a director or screenwriter. So yeah, that's a strange metric, but at least one of those fights, then you're good.
I totally agree. I think, again, it's like there's two hats. On the creative side, I totally agree, like working on the script, make sure it's ready. And hopefully you did that early in the process so you don't have a timeline or deadline for you, so you can make sure, okay, my script is ready and this is exactly what I want to do. And hopefully you got some notes from some like people that you trust who's going to give you like an honest feedback. But then on the logistical point, like actually going to production and making, I totally agree with you. It's like your cast and funding. Once you have those in place, in addition to your script, now you are ready. And like based on your cast availability, you can decide, okay, like this is our production date, and this is we're gonna start pre-production on this, and actually go into production from like a timeline base. Hopefully by then you have your team, at least your like producers, who would plan that and obviously support you along the process.
Sorry, real quick. I do think that sometimes we get a lot of scripts that the filmmaker is like, this is version 5, and so this is like done, it's ready, it's like good to go. And I think, and you know, like it takes so much work to get a script to a really, really good place. And there are scripts that are at a really good place that can still even get better. And I would also encourage, in this way of like finding what can get simplified or trimmed down to make it work with the budget that you might feel like you can achieve, you don't necessarily need to see that as something that is making your script lesser. I have seen so many times a script get better because it had to get trimmed or tweaked or whatever for purely budget reasons. And then afterwards, we watched it and we're like, oh, this entire trip that happened that was like going off, it actually didn't make sense for the characters. It didn't make sense for the pacing and momentum. We would have cut it anyway in the edit, and thank goodness we cut it and didn't have to shoot those additional days ahead of time. Or things like weird solves for a location issue or things like that actually made the film better. And so, those script tweaks that might need to happen to bring it actually to production ready, it doesn't necessarily need to be cutting arms off of your baby. It can sometimes make it even stronger.
That's great. And I think this speaks a lot to just the thinking about how we prep and how we manage our time in the process to make sure that like when it's production ready, we've actually put in the effort and energy to make sure, we're there in a meaningful way. I want to talk a bit about habits and like sustainability and how we can set ourselves up for success when, we're not just doing our first production, but indie productions in perpetuity. How are you guys seeing filmmakers that you work with or you yourselves as producers succeeding in that capacity, and like what are the habits that they are implementing into their work to help them make this more sustainable?
I guess maybe to clarify, are you asking about like financial sustainability or like mental health, or I guess those are all related.
That's a great question. I mean, I think all of it is connected, right? And like financial sustainability is something that we're probably going to be asking forever. So maybe focusing less on that and thinking about like our work habits and what kind of filmmakers you guys are seeing succeed because of like the way they're working.
Yeah, maybe this is just the continuation of what I said earlier with like really tightening up the script down to what's essential to tell the story. The number of hours you shoot in a day makes a huge difference. If you're doing all 12 or 14-hour days, it's going to kill people. That's just not really sustainable. And you can cut some of those hours off that's at the end of the day, that's pages and scenes that are cut. And then really having a tight shot list and making sure you're going into every day prepared. So I think, again, having those, let's not say fights, but really tough decisions and conversations with your AD, with your director, making sure that you're setting yourself up to have shorter days than longer days. And I think we're always trying to stretch dollars, but I think running sets in a humane way is really important, and especially when you're working on shoots that are say sub 1 million, and you don't have you're not working under an IATSE contract, or there aren't some of these structures that are given to you. I think it's problematic that in some independent film cultures, it's like, well, our standard day is going to be 12, and we also know that we're always going to go over. I don't think that should be the baseline that we're working from.
Very much agree with that. In terms of sustainability, when you're in this kind of development phase and trying to get all the pieces together, the filmmakers that I've seen succeed the most are the ones that continue working. And so even ones that have a day job and are only able to focus a limited amount of time on their creative work, they're still making shorts with their friends over the weekend. They're still helping out, other people on their sets. They're just constantly in the mix. And I think that does multiple things. Like, one, filmmaking is a craft, and it's something that you have to continue working on. And you can get rusty. And I think directors are one of the few people on a set that actually don't get a lot of time on set. They probably get the least amount of time on set, and I find that the ones that have been on more sets tend to be better directors. And so, like whatever you can to be on those sets. But so one is going to make you a better director, but two, it's also going to really build your community, your network, your tribe, where you can then go to those people when your project gets greenlit and you need someone to be a pinch hitter and come in and help out in whatever ways to fill in the gaps, because typically on a low budget indie, everyone's wearing multiple hats. And so, having that community rally behind you when your movie does get made, having been on their sets and helped them with their projects, or just continue to make things together, you're going to have that shorthand that's going to be so helpful. And I also just think it's nice and satisfying to just continue to make stuff and put it out there. So yeah, I would say just continue working the field.
I think when it comes to to habits, whether it's like a director or a producer, as you work with a lot of filmmakers, you're going to find people who have different styles of working, and there's not like one way and that's the only way, but it's on you to find what's your style of, like, what kind of producer you like to work with or to collaborate with, and you're going to find those people who maybe complement your skills and you work with them very, very good. I mean, you can find two excellent producers, but one of them will be like a perfect fit for your team versus the other. And I think as you work with more people in our field, that's relies on it's all about collaborating with others. You're gonna just build this group around you, whether it's like writers who's gonna support you from a creative standpoint, or directors or producers, and you're gonna build this group. And as you grow in the industry, they also grow with you. And I think in terms of looking at the career versus just one project, it's just about finding a handful of filmmakers who share maybe similar tastes and values, and you're gonna all grow together. But it's just about finding those people and just sticking together. And it's about support, you support them as they support you as well.
I don't think my answer was any different than you.
One more thing to add. I actually thought of two examples that some of these. I'll give two examples. They might sound crazy to folks in LA, but our productions in Chicago at my company, we've been trying to implement just different structures around production schedules. So one example is we did a feature a couple of years ago called Another Happy Day, starring Carrie Coon and Lauren Lapkus. And they were both, at the time, young mothers. The director and the producer were also mothers with young children. And this industry is not, I also have two young children, so we're a group of people who are very frustrated with how this industry is for parents with small kids or kids in general. Like a 14-hour workday just doesn't make sense, and overnights. So what the entire team decided to do was, which sounds like radical, which is to do a 9-to-5 shoot date and make the production like a regular job, and to provide and to pay for nannies for the entire production. And because the childcare was so crucial to everyone being able to work on the set, we're probably the only film ever to have the nannies credited and the childcare at the top of the movie. So that's something. So yeah, that was something that we're really proud of, and we would love to try to implement again. And to support that film, please check it out. It premiered at Santa Barbara, and whole other conversation. We sent it to Gravitas, but yeah, we don't get into that right now. And then the other model that I want to highlight is a company that we're working with, a new scrappy company in Chicago, has implemented the concept of the 4-day work week for film productions. So there are 4 days on, 3 days off. I know maybe that sounds mind-blowing or strange to people, but they've made like 3 micro-budget features in this way, and as you can imagine, the crews report that they're very happy working in this manner.
This is all really, really great to hear. I don't know if you guys have anything to add off of that, but this brings me to my next question, which is more about trust and accountability and creating comfortable environments on set. And I think, Eugene, obviously a lot of what you're talking about is contributing to these types of cultures or positive cultures. But beyond that, I would love for you guys to elaborate a little bit about how you guys from the top down are creating positive environments, trustworthy environments for the rest of your set.
Yeah, it's something that's really important to us, and I love that you guys are doing that. That's something that we've talked about trying to figure out is childcare at Vanishing Angle for our productions. But I think a lot of people say that a 12-hour workday is a necessity, and it's not. We've done at least 4 or 5 features that we committed to 10-hour days, and they were successful, they did well, everyone was happy. There is something to be said for a happy crew, makes for a very happy and pleasant production, and people are willing to like work harder, especially if they know that if they just like, put their all in, that it's not gonna get taken advantage of, and then, a bunch of OT hours are gonna happen after. So yeah, I mean, I think just in terms of a general sense, we find that the best creativity happens when it feels like summer camp, when it feels like the way, once you've been doing film for long enough, sometimes you can get jaded, it can feel exhausting, it can feel, and you crave how it used to feel when you were, just starting out and just like making movies with your friends. And so that's been like a, important mantra for us is like, make movies with your friends, like make movies with people that you trust and that you can have that creative freedom. Because if it feels like you're just clocking in at a job, then it's also very tough to have those kind of sparks of things that that make it extra special. And I think that the work hours actually really contribute to that, where like everyone there feels just passionate to be there and not feeling like they are being forced to work inhumane hours. But yeah, I mean, I think, part of that trust comes from really open communication, like talking about, these conversations between a director and a producer. Sometimes they're not necessarily easy conversations to have, but having a relationship where both parties feel like they can kind of speak openly and have a dialogue, and where it's a really healthy dialogue, is so important. And I have seen productions fail because one side is not listening or trusting the other, and it has to be this mutual thing. I think of producing as being a midwife. I'm not the person giving birth, but I really care about this baby coming out healthy and happy and having a good life. And so, there has to be that that level of trust and communication. Yeah.
I think from your end as a filmmaker, what can you do to make sure that your set is going like smooth and like everyone is happy and enjoying working with you? I think Noah, you referred to that. I think it comes from the top, from the director and the producer. I've been on so many sets, and you can right away feel it. The moment you come to set, you can tell if it's like a good set, everything's going smoothly, people are happy, versus no one likes being here. And usually it comes from the top, and having a competent producer and director makes a huge difference. And the way to do that, and that's in your hand as you're going into your next production, is by doing a lot of prep work. I can tell like if the producer or the director did their work in advance and they prepped, versus, they're on set and they're trying to figure out what to do on the spot. And that just, it appears the way they handle different situation and they deal with the different crew members, or maybe something's going to happen to you, so something that's not going to go your way, and you have to handle it. And if you're not prepared in advance, you're dealing with so many things, and to add to it like something that you don't like, then it will start to fall apart slowly. And that's a major difference. I've seen it with a lot of filmmakers. The ones who prep and spend time on that makes all the difference during production. So yeah, I would say something practical is like the prep. Obviously, in addition to, as Natalie said, like having transparency, like clear communication. It's clear what you want, and that makes the entire process easy. Like if you as a director has a clear communication with your DP, the production designers about what exactly you want, their job is going to be easier, and you're going to be much happier with the results. Versus, again, if it wasn't that situation.
Also, gratitude is such an easy, free way to make sure that people feel respected and to make a happy set. Like just saying thank you to people goes a long way.
Please and thank yous, very important. Good life lesson for everything you do, I would say. I want to steer us a little bit in the direction of SAG, and talk about contracts and getting a production SAG ready. What are some misconceptions that filmmakers might have about being a SAG production, incorporating and working with SAG contracts? Leslie, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about like what it means for something to be a truly low budget, micro budget production that's compliant and working actively with SAG.
Well, it's a lot easier than it used to be. When I started at SAGindie, it was a lot more paperwork that had to be mailed back and forth. Now SAG-AFTRA's got a producers portal where you can see the status of current productions, past productions. You can see where you are in the paperwork process. So things have gotten a lot easier. I would say probably at this point, the biggest misconception is that you can't afford to hire union talent when you're working with such a small budget. And when I say small budget, I mean that they have low budget contracts that would cover your film if it was under $20,000 and all the way up to $3 million. And so there's a big sliding scale in there, and they're willing to work with filmmakers who are making something for an extremely low budget. If you have questions about where you might fall on that, you can definitely find me after, or also Colin and Shafali from SAGindie are here as well in the audience. And it's a lot more straightforward, and if you're making something like a micro budget, that's so hands-off because you can't have nudity or sex or stunts or minors, but because of these things, that's pretty much you just sign yourself online. And it used to be more of like you need 4 to 6 weeks before you plan on using union talent. And I would still absolutely recommend that when you're not doing a micro budget, because you want to make sure that you have your all this time to get your paperwork and process. And so when you start online, it's like a pretty simple preliminary information sort of situation that is going to be processed by SAG-AFTRA because they're the people who are actually handling your paperwork. SAGindie, as I said, we're a nonprofit and we're an educational outreach organization. So if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed by the prospect of working with what is likely going to be your first union, with budgets these sizes, you're most likely going to start off with SAG-AFTRA, and if you've decided to you've made a couple non-union features and that kind of thing, and now you're ready, we are a resource for that. But honestly, it's gotten so much easier because now everything is online and streamlined, and you have these very satisfying visual cues of yes, this paperwork has been accepted, and this paperwork is still processing, and this was rejected, but really it's more because I uploaded the same document twice. It's that kind of thing. Am I?
That's great. I think it's a very simple way of demystifying it for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and so we want filmmakers to know that if it's right for your production, you can afford union talent, and the process is a lot easier. But that doesn't mean that it's that anyone likes doing it. That's
paperwork.
something that will be your superpower on set, is if you have a familiarity with SAG's low budget contracts and aren't afraid of how many moving parts there are. But if you are, that is why SAGindie exists.
Just to add on to it, how early should filmmakers be engaging with you guys, SAG-AFTRA and SAGindie?
Yeah, if you need help, we have monthly Zoom workshops that go through the basics, very simple bullet points that even if you're not sure that you want to hire union talent yet, I would encourage you to just check that out, because it's just the most basic information to make sure everyone is on the same page and kind of give you an idea of what you don't know already, because there's so much that when we don't know what we don't know, and with SAG-AFTRA, I would say a good rule of thumb is like you want to start the paperwork process 4 to 6 weeks before you have your talent rehearsing or traveling or anything like that. But we are available anytime, even if you started the paperwork process.
Wonderful, thank you. I have a question for us, a little more specific. It's really fun. It's about budgeting. Can we talk about common issues, mistakes that people are making for budgeting, for scheduling, and you know, you can use this to talk about your software and how it can help.
Great. Common mistakes. There are so many. I think as you're going to like the first feature, and it goes back to the first question about like the size of the project you're trying to make. Looking at your budget and like the resources you have and like how many days we can afford to shoot. Like if you're planning to shoot like 30 days and you have a very limited budget, that's probably a not good starting like point as you're going to your schedule. So just being realistic about how much can you achieve per day, how many pages can you shoot per day, that makes a huge difference. I mean, there are so many technicalities that goes into this, but having also like, again, going back to the team, having a good team, a producer or an AD who's going to help you and guide you, and honestly just tell you like, maybe this is not realistic. So at least you're going into the production with a realistic plan that you achieve and you feel that, okay, I'm making this happen. And like by the end of my 15 days or 18 days, I'm actually, I have a feature. I'm going to edit this feature versus you're like on day 9 and then you realize like, there's no way we can finish this. This is not a spot you want to be in. Now, I think the same goes for budget. And also like the advice here, as you're going to like a first feature, it's probably less than $1 million. You're probably going to rely on a lot of favors from your friends, people you know, and maybe discounts from different vendors. So it's going to be like it's just like there's so many that goes into it. So I think just having the realistic expectations from what can you get. Everyone would love to have more days and more time and all the tools and have a crane, but maybe like plan it like, because think about a career versus just one project. Okay, this is your project to go into the next step and so on. So like you just have to adjust your expectation, I think, of what can you do on your future. Now to your second point about the software and what we offer. Usually we're just talking about Movie Magic being the standard in the industry. There are other tools, Studio Binder and different tools that helps you with your schedule and the budget. These tools are a bit very traditional, a bit complicated. If you don't know how to actually use it, it might feel like overwhelming. So our software is called Shamu Studio. It helps you create a schedule and a budget very like efficiently and in an easy way. You can upload your script, your PDF script, and it would break down your script to the scenes, detecting your cast members, background actors, picture vehicles, props, animals if there's any, and get you this breakdown in 20 seconds. So from there, you can just go and actually start scheduling your film. So instead of spending like hours and hours, if not even days, just go in manually and you have to do all the breakdown manually and input all that information in one of the softwares, is done automatically for you. So you can focus on the creative aspect. So that's kind of the scheduling side. And we have people using this on major TV shows for their studios and some of the film schools as well. And we're very confident people, our ADs at the DJ, are able to create a polished schedule within 2 to 3 hours. Now from there, you can also create a budget using depends on obviously the different tiers, and we incorporate all the union rates, including SAG as well, and the low budget. So if you're making, let's say, a movie for, I mean, it could be like 3 million or 600,000. It depends on what agreement you're going to fall under. We automate that process. So from your schedule, we connect it to their scheduling. Your fringes are automated, your union rates, and then you can build your budget also within a few hours. So within a day, you'll have a very polished schedule and budget. But again, at the end of the day, we think of this tool as it's a tool to help the process be more efficient and easy, but it's not going to give you like a schedule that's, oh, you're going to just take it and shoot it. You still have to put some creative input in terms of like, what are you going to shoot first? You have the different locations you have, So, and I would invite all of you, like if you're here during the day, we're doing different demos, like showing these tools at the vendor hangout. If you'd like to take a look and see actually how it works live in front of you. Hopefully this covers that.
That's great. That's great.
I'll also just add that, in terms of when you're trying to figure out like what budget number you're trying to work with, we oftentimes will back our budget into an overall number, and how we find that number is usually based off of the SAG tier caps. So, knowing like what there's kind of these like no man's land where the low budget agreement, for example, can go up to $3 million if you have the diversity and casting incentive, but like so it doesn't make sense to have like a $3.5 million film, because just bumping up to the next SAG tier will eat up most of that. So so you want to be either at the SAG tier or just below, and you want to avoid those kind of no man's lands right above. And so looking at is the modified, is it 700 or something? Yeah, so it's like modified is 700K. So like you don't want to go, if you're shooting under $1 million, don't have a 900K budget, like have a 700K budget. And so just figure out like kind of the range in which you think that your movie can fall, or how much you think you can raise, and then just know that that's kind of a hard cap.
That's awesome. Good opportunity for us to talk about the other really fun one, money. For those of us who maybe don't have like a rich auntie who's helping us make our first movie, Eugene, I'm sure you could speak to this too, because you're based in Chicago, but a lot of filmmakers here who are not in New York and LA and have the kind of industry right at their fingertips. How can we think about financing through maybe more non-traditional avenues and getting the money together to make your movie?
I think at the beginning in the intros I mentioned that we're a 501c3, and that's unusual for production companies in the US that work in scripted narrative, and sometimes people ask me, why would you do that? And often my answer is, have you looked at the state of the industry for independent film? It's not particularly profitable as an industry. But the less sort of cheeky explanation is that thinking about how films are produced in Europe is really helpful for me. And I actually lived in Germany for the last 2 years and spent quite a lot of time traveling to different European film markets and meeting European film producers. And not that everything in Europe is better, but certainly health insurance, but that's also another topic. It's really fascinating to see what the capital stacks look like for projects that are in development. It's almost the inverse of what you see here, where a lot of independent filmmakers, whether it's the rich auntie's money or doctor, dentist, lawyer money, or some real estate guy in town who wants to get in film, often that first money in is a piece of often very naive first money in equity, and then they're trying to raise additional equity on top of that. And maybe as an afterthought, there's some talk about the film incentive if you're in a state with that, if your project's even eligible for it. Whereas in Europe, when you go to these markets, it's exactly the opposite. The filmmakers are coming up to you and saying, I have 15% funded from the EU, and I have another 30% from the German government at the federal level, and I have another 25% committed through a state incentive. So they're already at 60% with like soft money. And then oftentimes they're asking me to find equity investments from the US, which I often say, I can't. If you find someone, let me know, like share their number. But I guess my point is what we've been trying to do at Full Spectrum as a 501c3 is to try to replicate some of that like inverted capital stack, where it's not inverted from the European perspective, where the first money in we're trying to find is, can we find a lender who will cash flow the tax incentive? And maybe that's the first 25% that's committed. Can we work through philanthropy to get grants either for the filmmaker or for the project, or if there's a social impact campaign that we can build around the project, a funder that specifically funds in that issue space. And then maybe we can actually then at that point go out into the marketplace, and in those meetings with the first investor, you could say we have 40% of the budget committed and it's all soft money. And that's a very different conversation and very different starting point.
We've financed our projects in so many different ways. We just finished our 30th feature film, and each one of them has come together in wildly different ways. So there's no right way. I think, early on when I started producing, I was like, oh, there's a pathway, and there's, these like stepping stones, that you do, and you just have to like learn how to do them well. And the reality is, especially in today's marketplace, there is no pathway. You find it however you can. And so, sometimes that's, oftentimes it's now tax credits are a huge part of helping make the budget work. A lot of times it's private equity, and whether that's from a wealthy family member or just a dentist that you convince that this is a glamorous thing and that they want to be part of. But like using like all the resources that you can. So we do. Sometimes we use crowdfunding to fill a gap, or we finance entire features through crowd equity, like through WeFunder. We've sometimes done a negative pickup with a domestic distributor and then done the rest with international pre-sales. It really just depends on what the project is, who the filmmaker is, and where we think we can find those funds. But I think the most important takeaway is that there's no like right way to do it. There's no set pathway. It's literally however you can find the money.
I totally agree with you. Like there's like multiple ways of doing it, and you should explore all the options that mentioned, like tax incentives or grants and all that kind of thing. But to be more practical, as you're trying to make your first feature, the feature is probably below $1 million, and that if you the chances that you have to raise, most likely you need to raise your funds on your own, or you have obviously a team and you're going to raise it. And go back to the previous question, your budget is going to go at 300,000 or 700,000, for example, picking up your tier that you're going to fall under. And then, honestly, being realistic, you probably need to raise most of the money for that. And then the finishing funded through a tax incentives or a grant or a company or something like that. And that's just going to be through your network. As you mentioned, like like a wealthy family member or an investor or like a dentist, and you just have to convince them. And this goes back to the first question about what you mentioned about the lookbook. Having a lookbook that really convey your vision, but maybe add to that lookbook a few slides about the business side of it, in terms of the budget, your plan in terms of like marketing this film, how you're going to sell it. If you have a producer who can help you with this business aspect, that's going to help convince some people to put some money into your first feature. And the advice in general for filmmakers, you just don't want to wait for companies to come and tell you, here's your opportunity, here's like $3 million to make your film. We always hear about these stories of someone who graduated from film school and right away they made a big film. But a lot of times we don't know what happened behind the scenes and what goes on. So usually assume you're not that person and you're just going to make it on your own. And I think that's the fastest way, efficient way in terms of pushing your career forward without waiting for other opportunities. If it comes along the way, obviously take it and do it. But I think as you're making your first film, I think you just plan and find your team that's going to help you make it faster and not wait like 10 years to find the funding for your project.
Okay, I want to open it up to the audience, but it's super quick. If you guys can keep it to like 30 seconds, can you impart a piece of wisdom maybe that you would like to give to yourself for your first production that you didn't know, that the audience might want to know?
This is really just repeating a point I think we've all made a couple times, but I would say to my younger self, the script needs more work. Like we have literally planned shoots around Sundance and like South by deadlines and rushed into production when we probably should have just ignored that and spent that time working on the script.
Polite persistence. I feel like this is a hard industry. It's a hard time, especially right now. And finding ways to remain at the top of people's minds to, continue to push a conversation forward, gently, politely, but finding ways to, continue conversations even if it feels like that conversation has ended. I found the financing for my first documentary because I just literally, I got a no from someone and I guessed the email of someone else at the company and literally just tested first name, last name at company.com, first initial, last name at company.com, first initial, last initial, until I got one that didn't bounce back, and they ended up giving me my first money for the documentary, even though someone else at the company had told me no. And so it's just like whatever that means to you, just polite persistence. Don't be that annoying person that's just like that feels entitled to. I've had filmmakers reach out to me and try to schedule a meeting within the next month, and I'm shooting literally 2 different productions, and they seem offended when like I can't meet with them right away. So don't be the person that feels entitled to a meeting or whatever, but polite persistence.
I totally agree with you, especially when it comes to fundraising as well. You're gonna get 100 no. I mean, most people are going to tell you no until you find the 2-3 people who are going to tell you yes, and you only need those people. So I totally agree with that. A lot of prep, whether you're making your short film or a feature film, spend a good time on prep, and that's going to make your project much better. Focus on the performance of your actors as well. As a director, as a filmmaker, as you're making like a small indie, you probably don't have all the tools to compete and compare to the big films. So focus on the things that's within your hand. And that's one of the key elements that's going to show your skills as a director.
I'm going to say that, I mean, we all have to be wrong, and it's best to be as wrong as you can as soon as possible. So you figure out what works and what doesn't. And I guess just remind yourself that someday this pain will be useful, because when you see a producer who's really good at their job, it's because they have learned every lesson and they know how to anticipate before it happens, and just keep thinking that someday this pain will be useful.
The pain is good. Suffering is good. Let's open it up to the audience. Just raise your hand, call out the question. I'll repeat it back in the front row.
Yes.
Natalie, so sorry. Would you mind repeating the question back so we have it for the recording? Thank you.
Yeah. So the first part of the question was about WeFunder, and I'll expand on crowd equity, and then the second part of the question was about whether to have a plan for distribution in place kind of beforehand, like, or early on. So in terms of WeFunder, so WeFunder is a crowd equity platform. So it's different than Kickstarter or Indiegogo, where it works off of donations. WeFunder specifically works off of crowd equity. So everyone that contributes to the project is an actual profit participant. And so the minimum, I think, investment is, I want to say $100, and I think the maximum is $50,000. And we were lucky enough to have our film, The Beta Test. We raised $350K in 12 days on WeFunder. Now, that is not the norm on that platform. The filmmaker, Jim Cummings, already had a decent fan base from his first 2 features and his shorts. But if you have either yourselves as any kind of like influencer type, or if there's a cast member attached to your project that has a built-in fan base, trying to maximize that on the platform can really help. But some people find it to be easier to raise money on it because you're actually getting investors that are going to see a profit if the film does well. And then in terms of distribution plan, yes, I absolutely recommend having a distribution plan in place early on, and that is specifically in the current marketplace. It's rough out there for indie film, and I hope that it circles back and it gets better. But films are not selling out of film festivals the way that they used to, and there are fewer buyers, and specifically fewer buyers within this this kind of like low budget range. But that doesn't mean that your film is just going to, you know, whimper and die. It just means that to have a backstop in place of self-distribution or something else, if for whatever reason your film doesn't get into the big festival, or gets into the big festival but doesn't make a sale out of the big festival, whatever it is, that you have a plan in place of like how you're going to get the film out into the world, no matter what. That doesn't need, you know, if the cavalry's not coming, how do you do it on your own? And there are really great ways to self-distribute now. There are, you know, aggregators that can help you get onto the different platforms. We have Sundance did a case study on our self-distribution of our film Thunder Road, that you can, you know, search for just Sundance case study Thunder Road online, and as part of that, we literally broke down exactly what money we spent on marketing and print traffic, and how long we were in theaters, and how we reached out to the theatrical bookers, and all of those things is all listed out in there, and so you can use that as a blueprint. But be thinking about that before you get to that phase, because you don't want to be at the film festival or months after the film festival without any offers and not have the research done to be able to implement it if you need that backstop. And hopefully you don't, but it's good to have it just in case.
Right there.
I had a question for you, Gene, about, you were talking about kind of more humane work hours in the workday for shoots. I'm curious, like, what that conversation is like with financiers, when usually the, like, logic is try to make your budget as lean as possible, and usually that means cutting the amount of days. Like, how are you advocating for that when maybe they're not seeing the upside of, like, the crew getting more sleep?
Good question. Thankfully, the investors we've worked with have either been very vocally supportive of what we're doing, or just blissfully ignorant of what we're doing. I mean, it's kind of these silent investors are the nicest people, where they're like, they write the check and they're like, let me know when the premiere is and make sure you get me 2 tickets. So we tend to work with those 2 types of investors. And I guess that also, maybe kind of aside, a related point is we try to be pretty mindful about who we go into business with or who we accept money from, because we've definitely made the mistake at times of involving investors where their values are not really aligned with ours, and yeah, that can make for a very uncomfortable ride. So I know when you're trying to raise money for a film, you're kind of in the mode of like, anyone who will give me $5, I'll take it. But sometimes that $5 can be pretty costly, and sometimes if it's costing you like your personal integrity, maybe don't take that $5.
Can you say the question one more time?
Oh, sorry. I think, the question was, yeah, when we're working with investors, how do we sort of reconcile the fact that on the one hand, we want to have more humane work hours and in some sense work fewer hours, and how do we reconcile that with investors who want to kind of like get the most bang for their buck?
Who else? We have a couple more minutes. Right there.
As you're fundraising and trying to hit one of those SAG tier budgets, like 300K or 700K, that's only the production budget, or how does the P&A and how do you distribution plan?
Yeah, it's just production. So I mean, but that involves post and, you know, all of that stuff. But anything related to the distribution or marketing of the film is separate from that.
That's, yeah, the same answer.
I see 2 in the back. How about you on the left more side? Yeah.
I had a question about, I know a lot of filmmakers that I've worked with have asked and considered, and it's been LOIs. It seems to be such an important part to certain people, and at the same time, how much do you make of it?
I have never been asked to show an LOI for an attachment. Usually, but like but I'm also typically interacting with people that are familiar with our company and we have a track record with. So that might not be the case for everyone, but usually we just say, you know, here's who attached to the project, and we usually don't need to show any proof necessarily that they are. The only times that I guess we have been asked are when we're applying for a certain tax credit or something, where you have to kind of show certain people's attachments. Ooh, music.
They're playing us out. Okay. Well,
That's the first.
thank you guys so much.